Hi, and welcome back to the HSP Connection with me, Robbie Lee.
And me, Philippa Robinson. This is where we share our stories, insights, and strategies to help fellow highly sensitive people navigate their own path to living a fulfilling and meaningful life. What are we doing today, Robbie?
Well, Philippa, today we're talking burnout with our wonderful guest, Josh Speraneo. He's a life coach. He's co-host of the HSP Awakening Virtual Summit, which we were just a part of, and longtime friend of the podcast. Josh, welcome. So glad to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me back. It's great to see you guys and visit with you again. And loved having you guys as part of the summit and just hearing the feedback from your session. And so many people just loved what they heard and learned so much. And, we had so many different messages come back with just breakthroughs that people were experiencing based on what you shared about the strength and sensitivity. And so it's just, again, I love spending time with you guys, but I also loved getting to see so many other people discover the amazing work that you're doing and the amazing message that you guys share through everything that you do. And so it's an honor to be back with you.
Oh,
Thanks.
Josh, thank you so much.
Yeah, exactly. You're very welcome here anytime, Josh.
That's the secret, right? Be very complimentary and you're welcome all the time.
You guys make it very easy. So.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Well, yeah, thanks. So
you wanted to come talk to us about burnout.
Yeah, it's a subject that I think many of us as highly sensitive people and empaths experience. And it's just a subject that I thought could always use more attention and also just exploring where it starts, how it starts, what many people experience through that process, and then also what are some coping strategies for people who may find themselves on the brink of burnout or just the exhaustion that can set in or any of those elements. And so I don't know specifically how we want to dive into the subject. I just know it's something I'm very passionate about, and I appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to come and share and have this conversation with you around this topic.
Yeah, well, I think we've all experienced burnout, haven't we? So, and all three of us are HSPs. So I think it is a really, really important topic. Maybe could you start by telling us why you're so passionate about it?
Yeah. So years ago, I worked in a situation where I was working at a residential program for youth. And so I had just graduated college before that. I had a degree in psychology. And because I had my degree, they asked me if I would be interested in a role as a caseworker or case manager for the kids in one of the cottages at this program. And, I was right out of school and excited and enthusiastic, and it sounded amazing. And what I realized when I got involved was that I was way out of my depth, that there was a level of maturity I hadn't reached yet that was required for the role. And I thought, well, maybe if I push hard enough, if I try hard enough, I can grow into who I need to be to take this role on. But obviously back then I didn't know that what it meant to be an empath. I didn't know what it meant to be a highly sensitive person. And so what I found was that every day when I came in and would check in on the progress of the kids that were in that program that I felt responsible for, I noticed that if they'd had a great day, I had a great day. If they were struggling or suffering, if one of them had just taken a sudden turn for the worst, I somehow personalized that as though, what didn't I do to support them? What more could I have done? And so it became this emotional roller coaster day after day where I just really hinged my value and my worth on how well they were doing in their program. And so because of that, it got to where every day I had a little bit less energy to bring in with me. Every day when I would go home, I just felt exhausted. I felt that sense of burnout. And the term that I think fits even better with that situation, and for many sensitive people, is compassion fatigue. And so I'm not sure if you guys have heard that phrase or not, but for me, that's very much, it was actually during that season, somebody presented that term to me, and I didn't have the assertiveness or even maybe the self-knowledge at that point to say, yeah, that's where I'm at. What can I do? How can I get the help I need? And so I ended up leaving that job, just completely burned out, just and trying to find my footing in life after that, because I felt like I had failed the place that I worked. I felt like I had failed those kids, and just overall took that inside, and it turned into some depression and other negative circumstances beyond that. And so I think for me, that's kind of my burnout story, was this idea of looking, first of all, low self-worth leading me into that, where in that situation I was trying to find my value or worth in helping others, which was a very, very unhealthy place to start out with from the beginning. But then again, not understanding as an empath the emotional energy that I was taking on, how that was affecting me, how that was draining me in the process, and how to set proper boundaries. And so it just this whole host of issues that I wasn't ready to navigate at that age came up, and I didn't process them well. And so I guess maybe that's why I'm so passionate about this topic, is because my hope is that other empaths and highly sensitive can learn from our stories and our experiences and get the skills that they need to stay in those jobs and in those positions where they are positioned to help so many people, but also know how to set boundaries and protect their energy and take care of themselves so they don't go down that road of burnout. So I guess that's a place to start, I guess.
Oh gosh, thank you so much for sharing your story. And it is so relatable. I mean, I have a similar story that I could tell, and I am sure our listeners are feeling the same way, that, especially before we know that we're empaths or highly sensitive, before we have these tools, that burnout can get you so easily because we're just not aware of what's going on for us. And we care so deeply, like we want to help so much. And so, I heard you say that you thought if you could just like push harder, right? If you could just put more into it. And I found myself doing the same way. It's like, if I could just ask more of myself and do more. And that's actually led me down the wrong path and exactly toward burnout. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
And
there are so many fields where I feel like burnout is normalized now. So, I mean, when a teacher comes and says that they're burned out, or a social worker, or somebody in healthcare, oftentimes even people in leadership or in ministry or pastoral positions, it's almost just expected. Oh, well, everybody experiences burnout. That's normal. And it shouldn't be. And that's one of the other things I think around this topic that makes me so passionate, is like, let's stop normalizing the idea that people will just naturally burn out, because I feel like the supervisors of people in those positions are in a position to say or do something to protect their people. And if somebody under your care burns out, then the question I think people have to ask themselves is, could I have done something about this? Should I, as their supervisor, as their team leader, have noticed? Should I have asked more questions and checked in? Was I somehow out of touch with that person to where I didn't notice, what they were going through? And that's not, in my story, an accusation against anybody who was in my life at that time. I think I did really well at hiding it while I was there at work, and then went home and got more emotional and vulnerable there. And so that's not, not anything against anyone in my life, but it's just something where I think we have to stop normalizing the idea that everybody goes through burnout and that somehow that makes it okay. Instead of saying, no, let's figure out how to stop this epidemic and change this.
Yeah, absolutely. And the road back from burnout, it is a long one, or it can definitely be a long one. So I mean, it's incredibly short-sighted, isn't it? And damaging for everybody's health to actually be at a point where, well, burnout is inevitable, because those people are going to be out of the workforce for a considerable time, or certainly working under par and not at their best for a considerable time. And I certainly, I never realized it was burnout, and I just kept doing it over and over again. I'd have a week off work, because we can have a week off sick in the UK and still get paid, and then I'd go back to work, still really not great, and carry on for a bit longer until it floored me again, until it really properly floored me in 2017. But, it's just, I don't know, it's wrong on so many levels. And I know wrong is a really, I should be able to find a better word, but it's normalizing that is such an indictment of where we've got to as society, really. Just push, just push more. And when you've pushed, just carry on pushing. And, it is only going to end in a messy place.
Exactly. Yeah. And looking back at my story, I think that's one of the hardest things in looking back is to see the negative ripple effect or the fallout from the decisions I made during that season, which led to, not just the burnout, but also some broken friendships or relationships, to joblessness because I left that position without something else in mind. And it just, you're right. I mean, it was the aftermath of that was devastating, not just to me, but to those in my sphere of influence. And I think that that's the thing that so often we don't know someone's burning out until there is, whether there's some sort of scandal that comes out of it, or you go to work and suddenly someone's not there anymore. And I think so often the administration will try to hush that situation and, cover it up of, oh, well, they just found another position, and they don't want to admit, well, we weren't watching and this person burned out, or, that type of thing. So it is, I think people can get, because of the way that burnout is addressed, people can become kind of flippant about it, or think, well, you'll just bounce back. And the reality is not everybody does, especially with compassion fatigue. I mean, that it's not just your mental energy or your physical energy, it's also your emotional energy, to where for me in different parts of my story, I would get home and just sit in the hallway and weep and just sob because, again, feeling like I was failing those kids, feeling like I was letting my family and my friends down, feeling like I just couldn't find the strength to go back that next day. And, again, it's one of those things looking back where I know I was more irritable. I had trouble sleeping. There was so many symptoms, and now I know that was the time I should have asked for help. That was the time where I should have found a therapist. I should have opened up to friends and family. But for whatever reason, I felt either embarrassed or ashamed, or like I should be able to put myself back together again. And I guess maybe that's the first thing to direct towards anyone watching, is that if you are in that place where you're mentally, emotionally, and physically exhausted, and you are irritable and you're not sleeping, now is the time to ask for help, and now is the time to find somebody to share this with and to open up to, because the longer you hold that inside, the worse things will get. They won't fix themselves. It's not going to just get better. Now is the time to ask for help before everything falls apart, because in this scenario with burnout, prevention is always going to be easier than recovery, like you were saying, Philippa.
Yeah. And, Josh, I was struck as you were talking that I think some of the reasons why we don't reach out for help when we're feeling this way is because there's this misperception that it's our fault. Like there's something wrong with us, which is why I think we generally go internal and go, okay, well, if I can just push harder, if I can just do this, when really all of this burnout is pointing to systemic problems and workplace challenges. And, these are bigger pictures. It's not the failure of the individual that they're not working hard enough. And that's why burnout is happening, or they're not good enough. They're not enough, which is often the message we internalize to ourselves. That it is, wow, there's a lot coming at us and we need help. And there is nothing wrong with needing help. We are all designed to get help from others. We're designed to help each other. So I hope, that that's one of the things our listeners can take away, that if you are experiencing burnout, it's not a failure of yourself. And please, like Josh said, please reach out and get help, because there is help for it. And as you've both stated, it's easier to get help before you fully crash. The recovery is a little bit easier, but wherever you are on that cycle, please reach out.
Mhm.
Because you mentioned before, Josh, about I think you said that you perhaps now realize that you had your self-worth could have been in a better place. You had quite low self-worth before you ended up in this job, or you came to this position, so it just sort of piled on top of that. And I think if I too was like that, and I think if we don't have that confidence in our self, in our ability, before we get in a position that's very demanding, like you just said, Robbie, it's very easy place to go to feel, well, this is something wrong with me and I can't tell anybody, rather than being able to sort of take a step back and go, actually, the demands of this job are just, are just too much. I need some help with this. I need some help dealing with it. I need some coping strategies. I need, maybe I just need to not be doing it, if that is at all possible. But I know that when I was in my burnout scenarios, it was very much, well, everybody else seems to be able to do it. This is obviously just me that can't. But actually, I think there's a lot of people putting a brave face on it a lot of the time.
Yeah, and that's a thought that I've had in the time since then, because I've loved learning about self-worth and realizing what a pivotal role self-worth plays in each of our stories. And the reality is that it's very rare for somebody with a healthy sense of self-worth to burn out. And I think that that's because when we have a healthy level of self-worth, we're able, like you were saying, Robbie, to recognize that it's not that I'm broken, it's that something in the system isn't working. And, we're able to set boundaries with our work in maybe a better way. Because I know for me, part of the struggle I had in terms of the compassion fatigue was I would take work home with me. And so I was thinking about work all day long while I was there and riding that emotional roller coaster with the people I was trying to help. And then I would go home at night worried about what I would walk into the next day and worried about what would happen in the evening while I was gone at that residential program. And so it was just this constant state of worry, but all that stemmed from that sense or the feeling that my worth or my value comes from what I can contribute to the lives of others. And if I'm not doing a good job contributing to the lives of others, then I'm failing and I'm letting people down. And so, before going into that position, just growing up, that was often, I guess, because I felt like somewhere along the way I had lost my sense of self-worth or my sense of value. It was all about, if I can help you and make you feel better, then I have worth. And so that in itself, I'm sure, could be a whole separate episode, but I think it's something to be aware of. If you have a low sense of self-worth, if you're going into your job or volunteering somewhere looking for other people to give you a sense of worth or value, then you're already in a danger zone, because nobody else will ever be able to give you the value or worth that you already have, that's already locked up inside you. And when you rely on somebody else to make you feel valuable or worthy, in the long run, they will let you down, and that will eventually lead to you turning in on yourself. And so I think that that's something to be aware of as well. Kind of a red flag that comes to mind in this part of the conversation is just being very careful that if you are waiting for someone else or expecting that through your job you will find that sense of value and worth, it may short term do that for you. You may get a fix here or there, but the reality is that will never sustain you in that need. And only really looking inward and working on your building up your sense of self-worth, or the term I use a lot is filling your self-worth account. That's the only way that you're long-term going to be able to survive and thrive in a helping profession.
And actually, I'd say in nearly any profession, I think it's, it's an inside job, isn't it? To give yourself that solid grounding inside, that you know who you are, and have that confidence that we all seek. And I think it's quite hard to find when we're younger.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think with age, it becomes a bit easier because we've got more experience, but not that easy. I mean, we've all had to have our crashes really to find that out. And just before we move on, I'd love that you've brought compassion fatigue into this conversation, because I think that we can often think burnout is just about doing a job. Mm-hmm. And I know you're talking about compassion fatigue as part of a job, but carers and people who are who are caring for family members, and mm-hmm. in whatever capacity, it doesn't just have to be a job. That constant load, the emotional as well as the physical and the mental load and all of that, can also be burnout, because it is compassion fatigue. So I think generally the way that we're all supposed, I don't know, society seems to want us to work our fingers to the bone and then look after, there's no money to make sure that our kids are looked after properly, our aging parents are looked after properly. So, we've got it coming at us from all angles. And I don't want this to turn into a doom and gloom episode, because we're going to get onto some strategies. I hope we are. But it's a very real thing. And I think what we want here is for people to recognize in it, people who are listening, if anybody's listening and you're just getting a little bit like, I wonder if that's what's happening for me, we would like you to know that quicker than we all found out, so that you can get some support.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, and again, it's so much of it is just, raising awareness about this topic and getting people to really check in with themselves. And that's something that I wish I had been better at in the past, is just realizing that it's not normal to wake up in the morning and be exhausted already. It's not normal to dread going to your job. It's not normal to, when you've normally been a patient, kind, compassionate person, to suddenly just feel extremely irritable all the time, or to feel like your threshold for stress has gone from way up here to way down here, where the slightest thing sets you off. I mean, all of those things to me, or even if you've not dealt with depression in the past, but now suddenly you're experiencing depression, that can also be a symptom of burnout. And so, yeah, obviously, like you said, we'll get into coping skills and strategies and what our roads back from burnout have looked like. But that's just my encouragement to everyone is, either during or after this video, really tune into yourself, and think about, in terms of your stress level and in terms of how you've been feeling, could it be that you are living on the brink of burnout, and you're just barely getting through each day? Because if so, then now is the time to make those changes. Now is the time to pay close attention to that, and to realize, that something's off, something's not right here. Because I think we can go from that idea of thriving and doing really well to the stress builds, and suddenly it's like, oh, well, something's a little bit off, but I don't know what it is, to being stressed out, to being burned out. And on the other side of that, getting to the point where we either feel depressed and or completely disqualified from the life that we dreamed of, because we've gone down through that vicious cycle that can come with burnout. And so that's, if you are just feeling that sense that something's a little bit off, or I'm more stressed out than usual, the benefit of that is that you can catch it there and start to reverse things, as opposed to having to go all the way through that whole cycle and then try and pick up the pieces on the other side, and try and put yourself back together.
Yeah. So thank you. You've mentioned some of the signs there, that and I would add to that, if you just don't seem to be able to enjoy yourself, if mm-hmm. no matter what you do, there's no real joy there, and things that you used to really like listening to music or reading a book or watching a movie or something like that you just can't do, because you can't focus, because you can't stop thinking about whatever it is that's on your mind. Those are real signs that it's all getting too much.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned that, because that's something that you and I, looking at somebody's life from the outside, can also pay attention to, is in your coworkers, in your friends, in your family members. Have you noticed that the light in their eyes seems to be dimming? Have you noticed that their joy level it's like somebody turned the volume down to 1 from 10, So where they normally show up to a party or a get together and they have this tremendous amount of energy, they seem very lethargic. They seem exhausted. You see them interacting with their children and they're much more easily stressed out than normal. That's something that all of us looking on from the sidelines in somebody else's life now, when we've learned how to recover from burnout or how to prevent it, can begin to ask them, hey, are you okay? You seem stressed more than usual. You seem burned out. You seem worn out, and so noticing those symptoms in others, if we ourselves are doing well, can be potentially a way to save someone else from going down that road or going down that path. And all it takes is just pulling someone aside and just asking some of those questions and checking in. And I think that's like you're saying, both within ourselves, but then also within others, taking that time. And Robbie, I know you have more experience than I do in terms of leadership roles and human resources. But I would say, and you can speak to this as far as what companies might be able to do, or team leaders with their subordinates or employees, what they could do to check in. Have you seen companies do that well in the past?
I wish I could say yes. Most of my experience has been when they haven't done it well, because what pulls on the system is, lack of people in the pipeline. So what people are experiencing is that they're being required to do more and more at work with less. But what companies can do is they can offer wellness days, and they can properly staff so that people are having a reasonable amount of pie to do, a reasonable amount of work, not overworking people. They can normalize people saying, hey, I'm tired, like something needs to change for me here. We can start having these conversations and then be willing to do something about it. And on the front end, it seems like, oh, that's going to cost us money. But as we've been talking about, burnout and losing a great employee out of your system because of burnout, that costs a lot of money. So really, the minimal amounts of upfront costs can save companies down the road. I mean, exponentially, truly.
Thanks. I appreciate you speaking to that, because I know you have more experience there. And I think it's one of those things where it doesn't take a whole lot to just build into your system the idea that people need to check in with their team members, not just on a, hey, are you meeting your quotas, but hey, how are you doing here at work and also at home? And obviously there are limits to what all we can ask there, but I think if people are even halfway empathetic, they can tune in and notice when somebody's not performing well, doesn't seem to be feeling well, they're not showing up as themselves, like you mentioned, Philippa. The joy level seems to be turned down. They're not as energetic or excited or enthusiastic as they have been in the past. And all of those are just those warning signs that we can look at. And like you said, Robbie, the other element there is letting people know that it's okay to not be okay, that it's okay to admit that they're struggling, and that like you said, as a team leader, as a supervisor, you would much rather have someone pull you aside into your office and say, hey, I'm not doing well, I'm really struggling, than to watch that person burn out and just suddenly they call in one day and say, I'm not coming back, I can't come back, I can't do this anymore. And there are ways to watch for that and monitor that before it ever gets to that point, in terms of within a company, within an organization, or even within a church or a ministry as well, or a nonprofit. There are ways to keep an eye on people and really check in. And that's something that I guess on the other side, for us as highly sensitive people and as empaths, oftentimes I feel like we can tell when something's a little bit off with somebody. We can tell when their energy is shifted, when they're turning inward. And so I would encourage anybody watching who is a highly sensitive person or an empath by nature to look for those cues and to see what you can do. Obviously, we have to be careful how much help and how much energy we give to others. And I think that there's the danger, if someone is in that downward spiral, that we'll want to dive in after them, which can get very dangerous to everybody involved at that point. So we have to be careful how we help people. But the goal is that if we can tune in and we can notice that something's off, we may be able to also help break this cycle before somebody goes all the way through that process.
Yeah, I love what you're talking about. And the word that is coming to mind to me is compassion. And it's one of the, when I was having these conversations with leaders at my company, one of the drums that I would beat is these are whole humans that are coming here. They're not just worker machines. Like they have lives that are affecting them outside of this, and they're affected by the stress that happens here. Like, we are impacted by the things that happen. And for a long time in corporations, in the work world, it seems like what was expected is leave everything that isn't work outside and come and magically become a worker unit and do your thing no matter what else is going on. And I engage in so many conversations around that's not how humans work. That's not what's true for us. And so if we can compassionately look at the people that are around us and see what is really going on for them, and let's make changes in the system to make work easier for people, because people want to be able to do a good job and feel good about it. And they want to be able to go out and live their life at the end of that. And I think there's ways that we can do that for people. It's very doable.
Exactly.
I would love for us to start talking about, like, what do we do? We start saying, okay, burnout's happening. Now what, Josh? Now what?
Exactly. Yeah, that's a great point and a great place to shift the conversation in that direction. And I think, again, the first step is that process of really tuning in, looking for those warning signs. But when we notice them, when we start to notice that something is off, I think the next step is figuring out, what is it that I've done in the past that is rejuvenating for me? Where is it that in the past I've gotten that emotional energy back? And so that can vary for everybody. But I think one thing that's universal is rest, and giving yourself time to unplug from work, unplug from, like you mentioned, Philippa, maybe that caretaking situation, have somebody else come in and help. And take an afternoon, an hour, whatever you can get, whatever time you can get, to get away and to just rest. And so that may look like taking naps. That may look like not planning anything for a Saturday and just staying home and relaxing and resting. It may look like making time for a walk in nature, if that's something that's rejuvenating for you. It could look like, I know with Jen, she loves her massages. So it may look like planning a massage or a spa day. It may look like just making time to read a book that you've been putting off, that you'll enjoy, or making time for family and to get together with family and friends. And I think all of those things and more can be helpful, but it's, rest is pivotal. Rest has to be a part of the equation. And that sense of finding a way to release or detach from whatever situation it is that is draining so much energy out of you.
Yeah. So it's rest from that situation. It might not necessarily be, lying on the sofa. Rest, it does include, like you say, going out in nature, going for a walk, doing something that you might not necessarily think of as rest, but what you're talking about there is cutting off really from that situation that is leading you to burnout, and really having a good chunk of time away from it.
Yeah, exactly.
The way I like to go ahead.
No, you're good.
I was just going to say, the way I like to think of it, it's two prongs for me. It's rest. And like Philippa, you said, it's like rest from that situation. And you might check in with yourself and you literally might need to sleep, right? Depending on what's been going on for you. But then it's also restoration. So these other activities that you guys are talking about, that to me is in my restoration bucket. Yeah. So these are the things that put energy, that give me energy back. And so, rest and restoration.
I'm just written that down. I think we need that on a t-shirt as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's the key, I think, is just really tuning into, where have I found that sense of restoration in the past? And so often what I think happens is that, especially if we're in a job that is draining us, like we were talking about earlier, Robbie, it's that idea, if I just pour in more time and more energy, I can figure this out, I can make this work. And like you said, if the system itself is broken, then we more often than not will not be able to fix that just by ourselves and just with more time and more energy. And what happens is that in reality, as we're giving more time and energy to that, we're giving less time and energy to ourselves and to our family and to the people who love us. And I think that that's something that you see so often with those professions that we mentioned earlier, education, social work, healthcare, leadership, or ministry. Those people so often, the first people who notice what's happening to them are their family members, because they just stop showing up, or when they come home, they're so exhausted that it's impossible. They have no energy to play with their kids. They have no energy to spend time and communicate with their spouse. And so I think that is, if we notice that our time has shifted to where the people we love aren't getting as much time or energy from us, then that's another thing to pay attention to. And like you're saying, Philippa, that separation from work or whatever is draining us, to give the time to those people who energize us and fill us back up, is such an important element to pay attention to. And making the time, because so often, we can tell ourselves, well, I can't find the time, or I don't have the time. And it's like, you have to make that time for them. And like we talked about earlier as well, it may be time to make time for a therapist, and make time for a professional who can help you navigate this. Because if you've reached the limit of what you can do by yourself, for yourself, then it's time to talk to somebody who can help you navigate that, and who can give you those skills, coping skills and mechanisms to start getting your life back. And if that term, I just wish I could get my life back, resonates with people, then that's a sign that too much of your time or energy is going to a place that is draining the life out of you. And like you said, Philippa, it may mean a separation from that career, but it may also just mean that it's time for a change in the day to day, and it's time to start, incorporating restoration, Robbie, like you're saying, and really putting these practices into place. And it can be the simplest things, but the key is making time for that in whatever form it takes for you, and really being aware that something's out of balance and something's out of whack, and that you're no longer showing up as the enthusiastic, vibrant version of yourself you were months or years ago. And you can get back there, but it takes that intentionality and planning your time in a way that's going to bring you back from that brink of burnout.
And sometimes it can seem like a really big thing. Like it's almost like another thing to add to that stress bucket of, right, okay, how am I going to get out of this? And, not everybody can suddenly spend a day watching Netflix or go on a day trip. But for me, I think a lot of burnout feels like you've got no choice. You're in this like hamster wheel and you just can't get off. And I often talk in that situation about, okay, so how can we get the power back? It's almost like we've given all our power away to whatever it is that is sort of sucking the life out of us. So how can we take a little bit of power back? And it might just be something really simple, like, I don't know, making sure you have a 10-minute break for a cup of coffee rather than drinking it at your desk, making sure you take a lunch break, and just little by little doing small things. But when you've decided you're going to do it, stick to it. Promise yourself, okay, I'm going to walk around the block, I don't know, in at lunchtime, just to get out and have a change of scenery, and then do it and build up slowly. If you can't do the big sort of rest and restoration, there is always something that we can do. It feels like we can't, but there is always something that we can do to start taking up, putting us back into the equation and taking the and taking the power back. Really, that's I think
I love the way you language that, Philippa. And to me, it harkens back to what we were talking about with boundaries and self-worth too, and like that
Yeah.
self-compassion, self-love.
Yeah.
Because it's taking the power back and recognizing like our self-worth isn't in that thing over there. It's within us.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You know, it's recognizing that we do have the power to set some boundaries, although sometimes that feels overwhelming. But like you said, if if a big thing feels too big, start smaller and
Yeah.
I'm setting a boundary of this 10-minute coffee break and this 30-minute lunch to myself. That is what I'm doing no matter what. You know, start there. I
Yeah.
love that.
I think as you're saying that, I love everything you guys are saying. And the term that comes to mind for me that probably is one of the biggest lessons or concepts I wish I had known back during that period is the idea of having healthy self-interest. And so I think so often we, especially as highly sensitive people, feel like the world praises people who are selfless, who never think of themselves, who are willing to sacrifice their time and energy. And for so many of us that are seeking approval, that's what gets us praised, is this going above and beyond all the time for everyone to get their approval and putting ourselves on the back burner at every single opportunity. So we have selflessness on this end of the spectrum, but we feel like so often the world creates this dichotomy of if I'm not being selfless, I'm being selfish. And so that's this other end of the spectrum is, if I'm not here, then I must be being selfish. If I'm taking time for myself, if I'm thinking about self-care for me, I'm being selfish. And the reality is there's this huge section in the middle for healthy self-interest. And that's where I would say these activities we're talking about all fall into the idea of self-care or healthy self-interest is, taking a nap, making time for yourself, getting the rest and restoration that you need, getting therapy if that's what you need, taking an afternoon off. I think there's, I forget the statistics, but there are so many people who don't use their time away from work, even though they've earned it. They don't take their vacation days. They don't take an afternoon off, here or there just to plan something fun, something they're going to enjoy with their families. They don't actually use their vacation. And so all of that falls into this sphere of healthy self-interest and the activities that recharge us and bring joy to us, that would give us the energy we need to show back up, as our authentic selves with all the energy and joy that we can bring and the enthusiasm we can bring. And so you're absolutely right, Philippa. Sometimes it is just that 10 minutes. And it may be 10 minutes of meditation, 10 minutes of your favorite music. It may be taking the walk at lunchtime, like you said. I mean, any of those things would have made, I feel like, a profound difference in my own story, just taking any of that time for myself with a healthy activity. Because the other danger potentially is that we will turn to addictions or compulsive behaviors to numb ourselves in that process as we're burning out. And so what happens is that not only is the work draining us, but the coping skills we're turning to are draining us and depleting us even more. And we don't have to dive too far down that hole, but I would tell people that if they're falling prey to an addiction that either they're drinking more than they used to, or for those who use marijuana, they're using that more and numbing themselves out of their lives, or some people, the compulsion is towards pornography or things along that line. And so if that is something that has risen to more prominence in your life, if that is something that is getting out of control, all of those can be potentially other symptoms of burnout. But all that to get back to that idea of just the importance of healthy self-interest and giving yourself permission to take care of yourself. Because what happens, and this goes back to what you were saying earlier, Robbie, is when we take good care of ourselves, we show up with so much more power and energy and enthusiasm, and the organization, the people in our lives all benefit because we've taken that time to take care of ourselves. The overused analogy that is so apt is that idea of putting your oxygen mask on first, then putting the oxygen mask on the people around you when you're on a plane. But it's so true in life, because when I take time for myself, I take time for rest and restoration and to recharge, I come back and I have the life and the energy and the enthusiasm to feed into whatever cause the organization that I work for or work with is furthering. I have more energy to pour into my family members and my friends. And so it's so key that we realize that we have to give ourselves that permission and make time for that self-care and healthy self-interest, because it not only helps us to survive, but really helps us to thrive and to show up as the best version of ourselves everywhere we go. And it multiplies the impact of the cause or organization that we're involved with, that we work for. And everybody benefits when we take the time to take care of ourselves.
Yeah. I'm glad I've got healthy self-interest written on my piece of paper here, because I know that is a phrase that you use. I've heard you say it a few times, and I do think it's really important. And something that I heard a long time ago that has stuck with me, and maybe it's not 100% true, but it's always stuck in my mind, that nobody dies wishing they'd worked harder. Exactly. And that has come back to me over and over and over again. And that's true. Really, many of the dying wishes are, I wish I'd spent more time with my friends and family, and I wish I'd had more joy. So I think just before we close off, if that's okay, I would just I think as HSPs we are more prone to burnout. Would you both agree?
I would, as HSPs, and especially as empaths as well. With so much emotional energy that we're drawing in and that we're trying to pour out into others, I think that that's very prevalent for us.
And I would add the thing that I always talk about, which is, and I think we're more prone to it because of the systems that we have to navigate that aren't set up for us. I think if the systems looked differently, I don't know that we would be more prone than other people. But with the system we are in, we're more prone. Like, we get it first before other people do,
Yeah. I also think we might be prone because if we feel that being highly sensitive is something to hide, maybe, then we are less likely to speak up, because it's something in us that's making this happen. Which goes back to the self-worth piece that we were talking about. And this ties in with, Robbie and I love talking about, the strength in sensitivity and the strength that comes with being highly sensitive. So, if you're going to burn out, then you're not going to be able to be bringing all those strengths to the world. So, primarily we owe it to ourselves, obviously, not to burn out. But just think of all the things that we are going to miss out on, and the world is going to miss out on. Not, I don't want to add to the stress bucket, but it really, I would love people to take on board that being highly sensitive is an absolute wonder, that there is strength in it, that there is joy. It's not something to hide away. And if that means that your working life or some aspect of your life is not working for you and you are burning out, then please do look at it and take that healthy self-interest that you're talking about, Josh. And also, if we are prone to burnout, we can also be very the things that we can do to make ourselves better, strategies, that's the word I was looking for, the strategies to use to make ourselves feel better, we can also take those on board very well as well. That's, we're highly adaptive, and yes, we will suffer the consequences, but we will also benefit from the interventions. So, really, if you are highly sensitive and you're listening to this and you can't see your way out, you will benefit from those interventions because of the way you will process it and feel it deeply and all those things. So, go for it, look after yourself, take your power back, exercise that healthy, safe self-interest, and recover from burnout, please. We need you. Just, sorry, a little impassioned speech there.
No, that's
that
was awesome.
Yeah. Do either of you have anything that you want to say before we close it? I feel this is a good place to close. Does
I thought
anybody?
you wrapped us up so nicely there, Philippa. I was
Okay.
like, oh, beautiful. Well
I
said.
know.
Yeah.
Did it.
It just felt like it
We
needed to come
do
out.
need
So
you. We need
we
you.
do.
Yes.
we do.
Mhm.
And Josh, any final words from you?
So my last encouragement, the only thing I would add is just that reminder to everyone to reach out and to whether it is a family member, a friend, your employer, your supervisor, or even a therapist. If you've heard this message that we've shared today, and you think I'm right there on the edge of burnout, or I'm right in the middle of burnout, reach out and ask for help. And even if you want to send a message to one of us and say, hey, can you help me figure out what I can do to come back from this, that we're happy to try and direct you in the right direction as well. We may not have the qualifications to help you out of that season of burnout. If it's deep and ingrained, that may take someone with more skills or more training than what we have. But if we can't help you, we'll direct you and support you in reaching somebody who can. And so that would just be my last thing is you're not alone in this. And it doesn't have to be the end of your story, but if this has resonated deeply, and if it's really pushing that button on your heart of I need help, then reach out. Don't keep that to yourself, and don't suffer in silence any longer with the struggles that come with burnout, but instead let somebody guide you back to life, back out of this the darkness that is burnout, so you can come back and be your full, vibrant, lively, joyful self again. Because that's what the world needs, like Robbie was saying. That's what your family and friends long to see. And so be sure to reach out.
Amazing. I think we're done. Thank you, Josh. Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for coming and talking about burnout. It's a really important conversation to have, and we really appreciate you coming and doing this.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me back, and for creating a safe space for us to talk about this topic and raise more awareness around it for those who need to hear the message and need help.
Yeah, it's important. Robbie, do you want to start us saying goodbye?
Yes, if I could suddenly remember what our line is. So for now, it's bye from me.
It's bye from me.
And bye from me.
Yay! Thanks for listening to HSP Connection. If you've enjoyed it, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any future episodes. Also, we'd really appreciate it if you could rate the podcast and share it with anyone you think might be interested. It helps others find us. If you listen on Apple Podcasts, you can also leave us a review.
To get in touch with us, you can email us at hspconnectionpodcast@gmail.com. And we'd love to hear from you with your thoughts and comments on the episodes and any suggestions you have for future topics and guests.
We are both HSP coaches and speakers. And to find out more about Robbie, go to Robbie Lee, that's leigh.com.
And to find out more about Philippa, go to safeandsupported.co.uk. See you next time.